128 positive COVID-19 cases. Now let's move on. And the World Health Organization has acknowledged there is emerging evidence that the COVID-19 can be spread by tiny particles suspended in the air. If the evidence is confirmed, it may affect guidelines for indoor spaces. The WHO has so far said that the virus is transmitted through droplets when people cough or sneeze. But in an open letter to the Geneva-based agency, 239 scientists in 32 countries outlined evidence that they say shows floating virus particles can infect people who breathe them in. Now, because those smaller exhaled particles can linger in the air, the scientists in the group had been urging WHO to update its guidance. Let's now speak with Dr. Mercy Korir on this new evidence and what exactly does it mean for the fight against COVID-19. Good afternoon, Doc. It's great to see you as always. Let's talk about this emerging evidence. Is it true?
Okay, so from the WHO briefing yesterday in Geneva, the indication is that yes, there is emerging evidence towards this particular field about the coronavirus being airborne, but they were keen to add that it's not definitive. And so they have been in consultations and discussions with this set of experts from the 32 countries, the 239 experts, including other various experts, just to review tons and tons of evidence that comes in regards to the transmission of the coronavirus. So the WHO has not confirmed that it is airborne, but rather they are reviewing this evidence. So now from what the evidence presents is that in poorly ventilated rooms, in crowded spaces, then the virus is likely to linger in the air. So you can imagine if you're taking a lift and you're crowded in that lift, then you're likely to get transmission of the virus. Earlier on, I talked to a scientist who said that also considering the figures that we see in the country, and CS Cargo just confirmed that we have many asymptomatic patients. So the question they are raising is that could it be that when people are asymptomatic, then the virus is incompetent, such that they are not able to pass on an infectious form of the virus to be able to transmit the virus. So they are compiling the evidence when it comes to the asymptomatic cases, the evidence about the nature of the virus and when it stays on the air, because you have the heavy droplets which will drop close by, you have the lighter droplets which may go a further distance, and now what is now worrying is that small droplets, that is what could be airborne, or they can stay in what is like a misty environment. Let's say somebody sneezes, could those linger in the air for a while in such that somebody else may be infected? So far what they're saying is that yes, in poorly ventilated areas, in crowded areas, that is a risk, but as it is now, they do not have definitive and conclusive evidence. So what I see happening here is that the measures that have been there, because if you think about it, we have been talking about physical distancing. If it is airborne, physical distancing definitely comes into play. If it's about issue of ventilation, then keeping rooms open so that air can circulate easily will be one of the things. People who are in AC environments may have to reconsider what to do about that. So it may have some implications in terms of the guidelines and the policy, but may not be so much because of the nature of the containment measures that are currently in place. But definitely, Grace, this is something to watch and keep a keen eye on, even as WHO gives us a definitive briefing before the end of the week.
Doc, you've given us a detailed report, but then again, what does this mean moving forward, in this fight against the COVID-19, and particularly if we could just narrow it down to Kenya, coming just days after, the cessation of movement was lifted, and, in about 3 weeks, 21 days, we'll be having churches reopening, though people, we all know the guidelines that the president did give 100 people at a time, in the churches and other places of worship. But then again, what does this mean in this fight against COVID-19, particularly in Kenya?
Grace, if I can give the example of something like TB, which is spread easily through the air, the steps or the containment measures, the safety measures that have been put in place will have to go a notch higher. and we may have to rethink some of the measures and some of the rules that we've given, like opening up churches or allowing people to freely move. We may have to probably tighten or rethink them if at all this thing is confirmed to be airborne. Because you can imagine in a matatu, in a public transport vehicle, for example, that's a very small and crowded space where if one person is symptomatic, they cough or they sneeze, then they are likely to pass on the virus to the other passengers in that particular vehicle. So maybe a little bit of rethinking of that, some of the measures. Wearing of masks, for example, would we have to move to wear surgical masks, which, unlike a fabric mask like the one that I have here, confers better protection than the surgical mask confers better protection? Will you have to move to the N95 mask? So if you look at the implications that this will have, it means that the containment measures will have to be stepped up a notch higher so that as many Kenyans as possible would be protected from the virus.
Indeed, Doc. Thank you so much. Our very own Dr. Mercy Korir there, of course, talking to us about that emerging evidence that COVID-19 can be spread by tiny particles suspended in the air. Thank you, Doc, for that. Let's move on in a section of interfaith church leaders from the North Region.